Welcome to the Linux Spotlight. This show is dedicated to showing off the best thing about Linux, our community. This community is made up of developers, distro maintainers, YouTubers, and everyday users. Each one plays a vital role in our community, and the goal is to have a discussion with each individual about their journey into Linux and beyond. So join me now as we turn the spotlight on. Hello, I'm your host, Rocco, and with me today, our special guest is Robbie Ferguson.
Hey,
Robbie,
Rocco.
how are you?
Hey, doing great. You?
I am doing excellent, dude.
These days when I say I'm doing great, you got to give the air quotes. Yeah, doing great. Hanging in.
You're doing the best that you can.
That's it.
Yep. Well, I think that's what we're all doing right now. So
Yes, sir.
Yep. So, Robbie, most people will know you from being an on-air personality, podcaster, creator, founder of Category5. You have shows like Technology TV and Newsroom. They cover all of technology, not just Linux. People will know you from that. But if you were to meet somebody that didn't know you, what would you say to them if they said, "Who's Robbie Ferguson personally?"
The bald nerd.
I love it.
The .com was available, and so it kind of tends to define like who is Robbie. Yeah, he's the bald nerd. I mean, and I say that tongue in cheek a little bit, but there's so much to somebody who is okay with the fact that they're a nerd, because you realize that, hey, I've got some skills that I can share with people. I've got some my hobbies are hobbies. Like, I develop my hobbies into things that I can share with other people. And that's part of what it is for me to be the nerd, and the bald aspect of that is, goes without saying. But who am I? I guess, I'm a family guy. I have a wife and 3 kids at home, and we have a great time together, and I love spending time with them. We do our nature hikes as often as we can, and we're just finally getting to that point now where we can do that. The weather is nice enough here in Ontario, Canada, that we've been doing that every weekend. So I like family time. I like doing things with my kids and helping, having them involved in my hobbies. So that could be like having my son do Maker Tech with me, connecting GPIO on a Raspberry Pi to some circuit that I'm about to blow up, that kind of stuff. So we try to do things together.
Teaching them right.
Learning and bringing them along for the ride. So, because I'm always on a quest to learn. I'm never happy with, like, I'm never at that point where I'm done. I know all there is to know. I don't need to learn more. If I get to the point where, okay, I know enough about one topic, I'm moving on to something else. So I like to bring them with me.
Right. Well, I think I joke about it, teaching them right and bringing them up with technology. But I think the most important thing is bringing them up with you and interacting with them and spending time with them. And that's the most important thing. So I had, like we were talking before the show, and I had assumed that, Category5 is your full-time job, but, you relayed to me that it's not. So I don't know how you find time for everything, but what is your full-time job?
Category5 is it's a part-time gig, but my full-time work, I was hired as a programmer, particularly for web, but that has evolved. I'm mostly like sales and support in IT. So I do a lot of cybersecurity. I have a podcast that's specifically cybersecurity centric and work with companies like ESET and Malwarebytes and on the Windows side of things. So that's a big part of my full-time day is supporting people in the cybersecurity space. And I still do a little bit of dabbling in code and helping people with their websites and stuff like that.
Right. Well, having Category 5, that's something that you have to love doing. Like, and not specifically Category 5, but anytime you're putting out content and the amount of content that you put out, it's something that you gotta love to do. So I think sometimes it's a lot of work, but it's also maybe kind of like a dream job type thing, Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely that. And I think for me, the key thing, Rocco, is to always maintain that this is a part-time gig. And I'm a dreamer and we're all dreamers, but being satisfied where we are in life, I think is a really good way to continue enjoying those things, even though, as you say, it is a lot of work. Hobbies can very quickly become work. They can very quickly become burdens. And I never want my hobby, if you will, or this part-time gig, I never want it to become a burden. And it's not ever going to be that because of the way I've set it up. So this is very much what I do is and always has been very much that same mentality of I'm learning. And as I learn, I want to bring my kids, my viewers, my listeners, my community along for that learning process. So we learn together. And often I learn and get corrected by them.
Well, that is such a good way to look at things. And there's a lot of people that don't look at it that way. They're either doing it for the wrong reasons. They're doing it maybe for money or fame or whatever you want to call it. And man, you got to have your priorities straight. Otherwise, you're going to end up in a bad place, in a place you really don't want to be.
Sure.
How about hobbies outside of tech and Linux? I mean, you mentioned
outside of tech.
Well, you mentioned nature hikes and everything.
Sure, yeah.
So,
yeah.
I mean, is there time for that?
Well, I make time for it, Rocco. Like, as you say, the time with my wife and kids, that is crucial. And that's part of, like, that is who I am. It's not something that I, set aside time for. No, this is something I look forward to. So, so those hikes are like a regular thing, and sitting down for family dinners together and everything. So I love to cook. I love to, I don't get to do it as much as I'd like because I do work a fair bit, but I cook every Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Nice.
Yeah. Holidays. So that's a hobby of mine. Always dreamed of having not dreamed, but I always thought, hey, wouldn't it be fun to have a cooking YouTube channel, share some of my recipes? So that's something I really enjoy doing.
If there was only more time in the day, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. And, setting up cameras all around your kitchen, it's really hard to fly with the wife.
Probably going to be hard.
Yeah.
Well, being involved with, like Category 5 and, you do Linux topics. That's easy for you to talk about Linux there. What about family, friends,
Oh, dear.
Or is it easy to talk to them about Linux as well?
Rocco, I don't think I ever would. I have an interesting perspective on that, in that, and I know exactly where it comes from, but my perspective as far as family goes is I just don't want to be that guy, where it's like, I want to spend time with my mom and with my siblings and with my dad, and the conversation would have to be really at that point where we're not sure what to talk about before I start injecting, oh, let me tell you about this operating system that I use and love. Oh, I don't want to be that guy who says, oh, you're using Windows. I know something better. Like, I don't want to cause issues with family who are not.
I don't blame you.
Well, I'm the tech savvy one, if you will, right? So I've found my way here, and I'll share with you, but it's just not a conversation that I really push on them. It's like, I don't tell my parents to watch my show. Like, it's not for them.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm like, around me, I don't have anybody that I talk to about Linux. My dad, I will talk to him about Linux.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, he's about the only person, and that includes coworkers and everything.
Yeah.
So, I get it.
If the question comes up, like, so there have been times when someone says, "Oh, you know, what do you know about the Raspberry Pi?" Oh, let me tell you, like, this is okay. Let's. That's where Christmas dinner is going. That's where it's going.
Right.
So, but yeah, I don't tend to be pushy about open source, and I'll just show you what I have, and they like stuff like, you know, see my RetroPie, and so I'm pretty sure every family member's probably invested in a Raspberry Pi and installed RetroPie on it after seeing it at my place. But
nice.
Yeah.
Well, let's go down history lane and go back to the beginning of your computers. What was the first computer that you used?
What I would say is the first computer that I ever sat down and coded on would have been the VIC-20. And I used that thing like crazy. Like I got to the point where I was writing code at, 5-6 years old. Which incidentally, I always thought, oh, that's crazy, like coding at 6 years old. And my sons have done the same. And my 9-year-old now, our youngest, is coding in Roblox, and it's so that throws me back to those days. And I really like that time where computers, we understood how they worked. We understood the inner workings of them. So taking apart the Commodore VIC-20 was something that I was familiar with. But the first real computer, like PC, would have been an XT, which, as funny as it is, this big old IBM system that like is a boat anchor, as we say. I wasn't allowed to have a computer, so it was under blankets hidden in my closet. Like that's the kind of nerd I am, that as a child, I hid an XT computer in my closet so that my dad wouldn't find it and get me in trouble. I can't even imagine what I did with the monitor. I don't know how I figured out how to hide a CRT monitor.
Did he ever find it?
I can't imagine he didn't, but he never mentioned it. So I think he must have known, but my naive, stupid kid mind thinks that, the dad doesn't know. And it's like this massive computer. So
you mentioned at such an early age that you got involved with this stuff. How did that, was your parents involved with it?
No, I don't think they were involved in computing. Somehow I ended up with a Commodore VIC-20. I was too young to understand where it came from or how that happened. But my parents must have bought it.
Right.
I don't know the answer to that. I wish I did.
All right. So how does the progression go along through the years with your personal computers to the point where you hear about Linux?
Well, Linux was starting to become notable around the time when I was old enough to be searching for something other than Microsoft. So I was very much a DOS coder. Everything I did, like, I wasn't a Windows user. I was using like I can't remember. DeskView 386 was my OS, my multitasking environment with QEMM 386 to manage the low level of RAM that we had.
You are such a nerd, dude.
I'm a total nerd. And I ran a bulletin board system on TeleGuard under DeskView 386 so that I could multitask and still use the computer. And like, this was before Windows existed. So then Windows 3.1 and inevitably Windows 95. I think Windows 98 was the first time I even gave Windows a chance because I just couldn't stand the earlier stuff. But I was wanting something different. So I started seeking to find an alternative. And Linux was kind of the go-to because it was too late for Unix, I think, for me. That was a bit earlier. But I found Caldera Open Linux and I tried it and I couldn't get it quite to work. It was really, really young. But then, I guess Lindows came out later. So I had to use Windows for quite some time. And then Lindows finally came out, Michael Robertson's distro. And it was really good. It was able to transition me from a Windows user to a Linux user. It was Debian based, I believe, if I recall correctly. And the desktop environment just had some polish that made it easier to transition. So that got me into that space.
Do you remember like some of the pros and cons of that first experience where, you know, you find this new thing and it's cool, but there's got to be some issues with it too?
Well, Caldera was very young. So it was like you had to manually get everything going. And as a rookie Linux user, like having to compile your own drivers for everything in your system was just like, it was too tough. I wasn't there. So, but Lindows really made it so that it was just kind of plug and play. You just install the OS and it works. Click and run, let you install your apps very much like Synaptic does now. But that was the first good Linux experience, I guess. And then Xandros came after that, which allowed that integrated Wine into the OS so that it was able to run Windows applications, which again made it even easier to transition from Windows. So that is about the time when I started promoting Linux use to other people, Lindows and Xandros. That would have been about that time.
Now, how long is it before you make the switch to Linux?
Well, Lindows was a complete switch. Yeah.
Complete switch right from there.
Yeah. I used an early version of Adobe Photoshop in Wine because the old version ran fine under Wine. So, and then as soon as like CS2 came out, it was no longer, it wasn't working quite right. So, because back then GIMP was really bad. But they've since fixed that with 2.10. So, like scaling is a lot better now. But yeah, Lindows was about the time when I switched. I mean, I'm not name dropping. It was a classic distro. They got sued by Microsoft for the name. They had to change it to Linspire, which made no sense. And then in typical Michael Robertson style, he just fired everybody and sold the company and all the creative rights and everything. And now it's owned by somebody else. But that got me to love Debian. Debian got me to love Ubuntu. Ubuntu got me to love Mark Shuttleworth and the whole ecosystem of realizing that you can run a business based on support rather than product. I think that was kind of a revelation for me too. So it's like everybody, like you kind of move along with the waves and find where you're at. Right now, I run Linux Mint 19. I'm old school, so I like the Mate interface.
Well, I was going to ask you, so why do you've tried all of them, so why did you stick with Linux Mint?
I've been with it since 19 was released, and that's mainly because it just is a brilliant out of the box experience. I fell out of love with Ubuntu for a little while because of Unity. Unity made me fall out of love with Ubuntu.
You weren't a fan? Definitely
not. No. And I very much am a little old school in my desktop paradigm. So I say I prefer Mate. I really do. I really do like that interface. Like that's where I'm comfortable. So Linux Mint with Mate is a fantastic distro out of the box. Everything works. And they still support Compiz, which brings me all kinds of nerd joy.
Well, not to sway you or anything, not to tempt you to distro hop, but have you tried Ubuntu Mate and compared it to Linux Mint Mate?
Yeah. What Martin and Popey are doing is fantastic work. And I have run that on some of my lower end systems and love it. I've had it on laptops and stuff. My choice to use Linux Mint right now is not to say that Ubuntu Mate is not brilliant. It really is. But this is just where I've landed.
There you go.
When you know how things work under the hood, a lot of stuff is very similar. So it's really just finding a stable distro that works out of the box that doesn't waste a lot of your time setting it up. Because I use Linux Mint at work, I need something that I can like reinstall and be up and running in an hour and back in business kind of thing. So it's worked. Not that I couldn't do that with Ubuntu Mate.
It's just where you are.
It's just where I'm at. Yeah. And I think that makes it really confusing too for new Linux users, because, well, which flavor should I go with? Which distro? Why Ubuntu Mate versus Linux Mint with Mate? It's really, they're all very, very similar. So it's community, it's the ecosystem of the distro itself. It's, where's the support that, I don't need support, so I'm not really caring about that so much, but a novice user would. So.
Yep. Well, I think there's a big topic going around YouTube right now about distros don't matter, because basically saying the same thing, that it's all Linux under the hood. I think at some point, at some level, they do matter. But as in your case, it doesn't. So.
Yeah. But as I say, the ecosystem of the distro does matter.
Yes.
The community of the distro does matter. You can have a really good distro with a really miserable community. It's true. And it's true. It's sad, but it's true. And if you can find that happy medium, which I think definitely you see with Ubuntu, and there's always people that are, not representing the way that you or I might, but you try to find one that really kind of suits you.
Yep. All right, dude, what about you make a fresh install of Linux Mint? What kind of software do you need to install to have you up and running and be able to do your work?
Okay, so first of all, this is Linux Mint, so this is my desktop. So because I'm running Debian on my servers. As my desktop, first thing I'm going to do is make sure it's got GIMP 2.10 or higher, because by the time you watch this, it might be 3.7.
They're that good.
A lot of distros will come with 2.8, and the problem with 2.8 in the repositories is that scaling is lossy, is very lossy. So if you scale down an image, you're going to get a lot of granularity to the image, and then you wonder why everything seems blurry after you've resized it for your website. 2.10 fixed that, so they added some new interpolation. So I make sure I've got GIMP 2.10. That's key. FileZilla for SFTP, so that I can transfer files back and forth between my servers. Maybe OpenSSH server if I need to be able to connect back into this system. Brave browser. I don't know that that's really like a first thing, but definitely I'm going to put either Chrome or Brave, which I know is kind of funny.
Yep.
What else? That's my key kind of quick software. Atom editor. ATOM.
I usually use there's a few programs that I will install, like, Davinci Resolve, which I want to get into later.
Hey,
that's a program that
I have not done on Linux yet because I was unsuccessful on Linux.
Oh.
Have you had success?
Oh yeah, I've been using it for the last couple months.
Brilliant. Okay.
Do you have AMD or Nvidia graphics?
Nvidia.
Yeah, see, it doesn't work on AMD. It worked good for me. It has been working great for me on Nvidia.
I think that Davinci Resolve, and it doesn't matter whether you're on Windows or Linux, it has mad system requirements. And when I had an i7, I had my i7, I don't remember what it was, 2600K, does that sound right? Whatever it was, my i7 server that we used to use to broadcast would not run Davinci Resolve on Windows. Our current one, yeah, our i9 9900K is running it like a dream. But I think it probably would if I had Linux on there too. But I have to have Windows on my editing rig because of Telestream Wirecast.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah. I love Wirecast. It's not a jab, but it is holding me on Windows on that one machine.
Yep. Well, this is a 9900K, so an i9.
Well, there you go.
And it runs
so same
Resolve
system.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, yeah, definitely want to dive into Davinci Resolve then. But I would like to get into Category 5 and how that all came about. So we talk about, starting, creating content, but how do you go from, I don't know, a Linux user to saying, I want to create content?
That is further along, I think, than the initial start of Category 5.
So take us back to the beginning.
Well, at the beginning, it was not to create content, but to reduce the free support that I was providing to customers. Because as a business owner of an IT company, I was getting a lot of, we all do get a lot of phone calls. This goes back to family, Rocco.
Yep.
As soon as they know that you're really good on computers, then you're just going to be answering questions for free all the time. So shh. So I took a different approach. Instead of keeping my mouth shut, and not because I really want to be able to help people and genuinely want to make sure that they're getting good support, but they all expect to be able to make a phone call and ask you questions for free. So I said, okay, I need to be able to do that, provide answers to those questions, but I can't afford as a small home business at that time to be dedicating sometimes hours per day answering questions and not being able to bill for the time. So I said, okay, I'm gonna set aside a night once per week, and I'm gonna webcast this thing, and you can call in and ask your questions. And that's how it started. So my motivation was not to create content, because there's no such thing as live YouTube streams at that time. We're going back 13 years, right? So yep. HD video didn't exist. Everything was 4:3. Nobody had a 16:9 display or camera, or so we're going way back. And then that evolved into content creation. So that grew to the point where I was like, okay, well, what is our niche? What is it that we do? And that's where Linux comes in, because there just were no shows back then that were doing Linux. So I did have we say it's a Linux bias. So we're not a Linux show. We are a tech show, general tech, with a Linux bias. And I think that works.
It does. It does work. But so you go from this webcast to start to creating content. Is there a vision in there to say, hey, we're going to get to a point of where you are today?
I think it's just been, everything's a little bit of a stepping stone, Rocco. I never went into it expecting to be a big broadcaster on the internet or have we've got a pretty great community. I guess the community thing has always been there. So it was just the evolution, the natural evolution of the thing that we were creating and the great group of people that were creating it. So simply a natural evolution versus, as you say, there are those who go into this with the mindset of, I want to build a business, I want to build a network, and I want to get rich, and I want to be, this is what I want to do. And my approach has been completely different, just because this scenario and what this is to me, it's more of a labor of love and a way of supporting the community than it is to build a business or, I got to keep the lights on, but
yes,
we're not, that's not our motivation. But as you've seen, we've grown through that time. We just moved into our new studio space, and it's the best studio we've ever had. And incidentally, I can't hire a construction company to come in and put it together for me, but that will come. Nobody saw that coming. But so it's just been a natural kind of flow of growing the community, growing our program, and see where it takes us. Now, I have dabbled in other things as I produced tech TV, so I've never stopped doing tech TV for any amount of time. In that I'm always produced. That's our flagship show. But we've tried doing things like the Drone Zone, where we did like quadcopters and things like that when they were first on the up and up. We've tried all kinds of programs and seen what flew. We did a Christian faith broadcast for 4 seasons.
I've seen that.
Yeah. So, and that's not me hosting it. That's just us using our space to provide more programming. So we've kind of dabbled in other things to build a network of shows. But then it always comes back to tech TV. And this is because this is my heart. This is where I'm at, and what I want to be producing, personally as a host. And so that's kind of where we're focused at right now.
So you talked about the studio, but you didn't obviously didn't start out with a studio.
No.
Where did the humble beginnings start out with? What kind of equipment did you have? Like, where did you start?
Well, as I mentioned, it was a home business. So I was at my desk in my basement. Our rec room converted into an office. So we just had a big desk. And at that time, I had a 320 megapixel 4:3 webcam. That's what they made back then, folks. I had
that was top of the line.
Yeah, no, it was not, but it was what I could get on a budget. It actually was, I guess, probably a pretty high-end webcam at that time. I did have a pretty decent mic, though. After some time, I got a Rode NT1, which I still use for voiceover, because they are just beautiful microphones. So I had an NT1, which is a big honkin' studio mic, sitting on my desk in front of me, doing a live broadcast on a webcam that's 320p. And look at us now.
Right. Well, Tech TV is in season 13.
Yeah.
And as of this recording, it has 649 episodes. Dude.
650. You're behind by one Wednesday.
Okay, so 650.
Yeah.
This is amazing. This is a huge amount of work over a long period of time. I mean, my hat's off to you for keeping it going for that long and that many years.
Yeah, thank you.
So you moved to Studio D, right? But were there other studios as you go along, or were you just calling them studios? How's that work out?
Yes, so we're using this amazing algorithm called the alphabet to label our studios. So Studio D is A, B, C, D, fourth studio. And D, what D represented was the first studio that was out of a house. So our house. So studios A and B were both at our one house. Studio C, my wife and I had bought a house, and so we converted the basement into a studio. And then Studio D represented getting the studio out of the house. So that was our first.
How did that feel to have like a special space to create your shows?
Scary in a lot of ways, really exciting, but still scary because, as I've kind of alluded to, our motivator has never been money. But now all of a sudden I've got somebody saying, okay, I need the rent. All right, I need the insurance. I need the electrical bill paid.
Yep.
So this was a really big step for the show. And to be honest, it was in fact a bit of a trial as well to see, is this thing self-sustainable? Is it something that we can do as a business, but like, can it pay for itself is kind of so it was frightening, Rocco, to be honest, the first while. And, but we seem to have pulled it off, I think. So,
well, you've been broadcasting for 5 years? So 5 or so years from Studio D.
We were 6 years in Studio D, I believe. Yeah.
And then you get some like heartbreaking news that you have to move out of Studio D, dude.
At the end of February of this year. So if you can imagine, this shocking news that we received, as Rocco is pointing to, was our landlord saying that he wanted to repurpose the space that we were in. So we'd been there for 6 years, and it was a good deal. We were getting a great deal from him. So, and he knew that. And I think our welcome apparently ended at about that time. He wanted to repurpose the space. But interestingly enough, okay, that's a shocker. We've got 1 month to find a new place, to get the insurance moved over, to get internet service installed, to get the walls painted and get everything ready, get the construction done. We've got 1 month. And then about a week and a half later, this whole pandemic thing happened. So we're in the middle of this, and my crew is not allowed to come and help. My staff are not allowed to come visit and help me pack boxes, or, you know, because they're a wonderful crew. They would have helped me pack boxes. They did a little, but so that's a bit of an exaggeration. They did help a lot, but it was largely like a one-man job because of the pandemic. It was kind of nuts.
Yep. This situation that we're in today has complicated so many different things. And your example is just one of them that it complicates. And all I can say is I'm happy to see you in Studio E now.
Same.
You did get a new studio. You put the call out there for help. And how was that received, that call?
So we posted a Kickstarter campaign when I got the news. I'll call it bad news. It was tough because to find out, we have a lot of stuff, Rocco. We like gear and everything, like understand at our Studio D, we had just invested. So when I say invested, we had just spent the money finally to buy a Tascam recorder so that we had isolated audio on 8 channels. That was a big upgrade for us because up until then we were using the stereo mix off a Behringer board, so we couldn't isolate audio channels. So we just did that. I just bought a rack for our servers and everything else. Like we just did all this stuff. It was the weekend before we got the news from the landlord that I had my son come to the studio with me, because as I mentioned, I like to have him involved. I like to have my children involved. And so he actually wired the sound system for us. And I just kind of directed him, here's how you plug everything into the new Tascam and we moved all the stuff into the rack, and he did that, and he did a great job, and it worked. And then I got the news. We never, I think maybe we did one show with that setup. So it was just wild. So all that to say, I made a call to the community because, hey, I just bled the bank account dry. Like we operate on a shoestring budget as it is. And we just invested in these upgrades, never suspecting that this was going to happen, that we were going to have to move in 4 weeks. Unreal. So the first part of me is like, are we going to survive this? Is Category 5 going to end like this? And so I said, I was honest with our community, and I brought it up on Kickstarter, and I published a video, and I said, look, here's the reality of the situation. We have to move. This is before we knew about the pandemic, folks. So this is just a normal, like, stressful situation for a broadcaster. We have to move. We've got very little money in the bank because of all these expenses that we just had. And we need help. And so I figured like we needed about $3,500 just to be safe, because that would get us at least into a place with like our first month's rent paid. And little did I know there's going to be like, moving truck expenses, like all this other stuff, which is, adds to it too. But at least that gave me an arbitrary goal to say, we need this much to at least think that we're safe.
Yep.
And we exceeded that within 3 hours of the campaign. So, and then it just kept going through the month. So we were able to get into our space safely, money left over for the contractor who isn't allowed to work. But things came together and things worked out. The funds were there thanks to our community. So these are viewers of the show who said, yeah, I can get behind this and I want to see this show survive. I couldn't have done it without them, period.
That is an amazing thing, dude, to see the community step up and help out with that. But that goes back to maybe the people behind it, like you, behind the community, who people gravitate towards the same kind of people. So you create a community, but the community members are pretty much gravitating towards you. And yeah, that goes a long way.
Yeah, cheers.
All right, so how involved are you in the daily production of shows? Like, are you the video editor, the audio editor? Are you the guy with many hats, or like how involved are you?
Completely and totally. Through the pandemic, just like so I have a staff that co-host with me and come in. If they're on the news desk, the news is assembled by me, put on the teleprompter by me, everything, so that comes to me, and then they're on air, and they help out here and there when they can. But really, like, I guess through the pandemic, it's also been a chance for me to see what it is that I'm actually doing, because it's just me here right now for the time being. It's all going to come about, but so a lot of it falls on me. I don't want to say all of it, Rocco, because I do have a great team.
Who's the great team, dude? Who are those people?
Well, Sasha's been with us for years and years. Sasha, unfortunately, has had to, through the course of everything that's gone on in the past week, I hate to keep saying pandemic, but she's had to move away to care for her father-in-law. So she's no longer going to be with us, at least here physically in the studio. Jeff Weston is a longtime co-host. Henry Bailey Brown. We also have Robert Koenig, who remotes to us from Florida. And that, I would say, is our kind of core team at this time. And now I'm going to say it again, through the pandemic, there's one person who is allowed to be here with me, and that's my wife. And so she has taken on the news desk, which has been really interesting because she's doing a fabulous job. And so I don't know what that means for the show.
That's awesome for the show.
We'll see. Yeah. So it's just maybe y'all could send her an email and try to encourage her to, hey, you're doing so good, and we really like having you here. So
yep.
Maybe she'll be like, okay, maybe I can extend this beyond, when they say you can start having your staff back. We'll see.
Well, you made a video, and I want to go back to Davinci Resolve, because you made a video, I forget which one it was, to be honest with you, but you talked about how you may make an upcoming video about your production and how you use Davinci Resolve in it. So with all of the software out there, all of the choices, why do you choose to use Davinci Resolve?
Oh, no. All of the open source advocates are about to crash down on me right now. I have to tread very carefully here.
Yes.
There are some great open source alternatives. Davinci Resolve being closed source, but freely available from Blackmagic Design. I was using Cyberlink Power Director, which was a fantastic tool. For the price, it's unreal what you can do with that. And I used it for years. And I just was so familiar with it that it worked great. But it's Windows only too. But and Davinci Resolve you can run on Linux. I think there's a Mac version too, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a little more flexibility there. But what Cyberlink didn't give me, and what other tools that I've looked at didn't give me, was 18/9. I was locked. Cyberlink is locked to either 4/3 or 16/9. So that removes your ability to do 360 video. That removes your ability to do 21/9 or 18/9 aspect ratios. Category 5 TV is we are shooting in 4K, and we downsample it to 2K at 2/1 or 18/9. So the aspect ratio it's basically like it's an in-between 16/9 widescreen and cinematic. So there's that happy medium of 18/9, which is really, really nice, because a lot of smartphones are coming out in that aspect ratio. So it looks really good. So that was really one of the things that was pushing me, Rocco. But there's so much more than that.
Yeah, I'm not here to put you on the spot with Davinci Resolve, because I know there are many open source programs that can do a lot of great things.
Yeah.
And just from my personal experience, I have tried a lot of open source software.
Yeah.
It's just that Davinci Resolve takes it to another whole level up in quality and features that I had to make the jump.
Yeah. I'll just say, to tread carefully, I really wish the open source community well with these open source editors, video editors. They're not there yet, period. Anyone who says that open source video editing is there right now, or Linux editing, I guess we'd say, it's not there. And as a professional broadcaster, I know this because I tried really, really hard. I tried everything that I could find that was open source, and everyone had something about it that was really a problem. And no software is perfect. I'm not treading carefully enough, am I?
You're not, but it's okay.
No. Okay, so I love open source, and I promote open source, and I want to use as much open source in my workflow as I possibly can. However, there are times when we have to realize that there are closed source alternatives to those products that are better. And Davinci Resolve falls into this interesting space where it feels like you're using an editor that should be costing you thousands of dollars to use. And was my choice cost? No, I was using CyberLink Power Director, and it costs money. I have to pay for it every couple of years when they bring out a new version that has something bigger and better. So I was paying for that. I'd gladly pay for Davinci Resolve, and I've considered it because the free version does not allow you to do full, you can't have a second TV for your preview. And that's the one selling point that's probably going to push me to buy. But there's just nothing like it. It's really, really good. There's no limits to it, I guess. So if I was to say, okay, Windows is this, and Linux to Windows is this. So Linux is the freedom of being able to use your operating system the way that you want. So to me, Davinci Resolve as a software, not from the way that it's distributed or the code base or anything like that, but as a software, it is limitless. It removes all the restrictions very much in that same kind of way. So when I say I can do 2:1 video, well, I can do any aspect ratio because I set the resolution of the video by the pixel, just like as if I was using a graphic editor. I set the how many pixels wide, how many pixels high, and that's what I do. So it's just limitless. It's limitless.
It is. And I have purchased Davinci Resolve for $299.
And what pushed you there?
Well, to be honest with you, when I tried the free version of Davinci Resolve, I was having trouble with the codecs on Linux. So on the free version. That is
different because I'm on Windows on that one computer.
So on the studio version, you have no limitations as far as the codecs are concerned. So I purchased it. And you know what? There are situations for the open source alternatives that they are perfect for somebody creating a certain type of content or a certain amount of content. There are definitely places for that. But if you want to take it to the next level, if you want to learn video editing with a complete program that, as you say, has no limits, Davinci Resolve to me is that program. And I was more than happy to pay for it because of that.
Yeah.
So
I am sorry to have to break that news to the community.
Well, you know, you had mentioned Wirecast before.
Yeah.
So you live stream to, I guess it's Telestream Wirecast and Nimble Streamer, which people can watch on Roku or Kodi. So in a world where podcasts, audio podcasts are, you know, all the rage, everybody's doing audio podcasts. Why do you still feel it's important to do a video production of the show?
Because I've invested in all this gear. Oh, could you imagine if I just switched to podcasting? Oh, man. I wouldn't have to worry about the construction. No, so workflow is Wirecast is the live camera switcher. That's the software that runs the camera switching. And we've got Magewell capture devices that all of our cameras plug into, and other sources like laptops and things like that. And then that streams out to Nimble Streamer. So Nimble Streamer is a transcoder. So it then sends it retranscodes in HLS format to YouTube, Facebook Live, as you say, Roku, Kodi, all of the different platforms, so that anyone can be watching live from anywhere. So that's the workflow. As far as audio versus video, I think that just what we do works well in the video space. So we do have a podcast, like you can listen in MP3 format, but it's a very visual program in a lot of ways. The newsroom doesn't necessarily warrant that you have to have video. But if we're doing a screen capture of, teaching you how to do things in the terminal, you really got to be able to see it on the screen. So,
well, again, there have been so many people that have come up to me and said, hey, if you would just cut the video portion out and just put out the audio, it would be so much easier. And it would be so much easier to do. But
you could do it from anywhere. That's what is like, podcasters are just in their glory day right now because they're doing Zoom from anywhere.
But when you do video, you seem to connect more with people, with the audience.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if I'm watching a video or I'm hearing an audio,
yeah,
I'm listening. But if I'm seeing a video, I can connect with that person and almost build a semi-relationship, even though that person doesn't know I exist. I can build a semi-relationship with them. I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, maybe you're right there. Yeah, for sure. And I certainly see that from the other side of it, where as a broadcaster, in meeting viewers in person, there is a connection there that maybe we wouldn't have through a podcast. And maybe it is the visual aspect, because it's not, oh, I recognize your voice from somewhere. It's like, oh, hey, there's the bald nerd. Let's go talk to him.
Well, I'm going to bring up the pandemic again, dude. You did it, so I'm going to do it. I'm just going to follow suit.
We, like so many things, we can't pretend that we're not in this situation, that we're not in this together. We are. So that's okay. I just hate to keep referring to it because it doesn't define me, and it doesn't define our show. It doesn't define any of us. It's just but this is what we're going through together. So,
yeah. Well, it doesn't define you, but it has to have changed right now how you are putting out content and creating content.
It has to. Yeah.
So what are some of them things that have changed?
Well, I think that's hard to blame on the pandemic because of our studio move, right? But what it is changed with our studio move is, as I've mentioned, I can't have my contractor come in. So everything that we had planned is on hold until we can. And even still, now we're looking at things like, there was meant to be a stage built here, and that stage was going to have a desk on it with 3 people sitting at it. Well, we have to be 6 feet apart now. Like, so everything is like, so when we can have our contractor come in, how are things going to be changed? Right. As far as how we can lay out a studio. So there's that. So then I'm looking at things like, I've been doing a couple of shows from the producer's office. And so then I'm looking at, okay, how can we reduce the fan noise in the producer's room? Because that's where the servers are. So looking at that kind of stuff and thinking, okay, well, that gives us extra broadcast room so that we can have somebody in here and somebody in there and be doing a show together. So I don't know how it's changed things yet. I know that we've lost some of our team on account of it. They're still with us. I just mean that they're not going to be here physically on the show. We'll have them join us by Zoom and things like that as best we can. But so that's difficult to swallow. Somebody that has been working with us for so many years, and we knew that she'd eventually be moving away, but oh well, it's happening next week, kind of thing, because of this.
Yep.
So.
Well, through this, dude, you started maybe not through this, but you have a show, you've been doing a show called Coffee Break. And it's where you jump on a video call with community members.
Yeah.
And I love this concept because it's so similar to the Biddle live stream that we do. How has this been received by the community, and do you think it's going to continue?
It is a result of everything that's going on. So during the process of the move, finding out that, okay, now we're under a pandemic and we're not allowed to interact with one another physically in the same room. So I launched Coffee Break as a means of our community being able to still come together. So it's a chance for our community to just have a hangout. It's a time for us to just chat about anything else. We're not so if I said the word pandemic, they'd be, hey, not supposed to talk about that here. So it's just a time for our community to be able to spend time together and hey, what's going on in your life that's not related to what's going on. Yeah. And I think it's been well received. It's a small crew that show up every day, because we do it every day. And I think that were we to market it as what it is more to the community, then maybe we'd have a larger group. But I think having that intimacy is kind of special, getting to know a core amount of people, and maybe that will grow. But right now it is very intimate. So it's been a lot of fun, and we've had some really neat tech discussions too.
That is kind of where you find those great discussions. It's almost like you went out to eat with a bunch of friends, and you start talking about a favorite subject. So, yep, you find some good conversations there. Mm-hmm. So, where does Category 5 go from here? What are the plans for the future?
Wow. Plans for the future. Well, we're evolving the format quite a bit, and some of that does come from everything that's been going on. So that has to do with our newsroom feature kind of growing and evolving how that's going to work, because I can't sit people at a desk next to one another reading a teleprompter and huddled in so that we can all see the teleprompter. So that's changing and evolving. But I think if we take the right approach, which we're trying to do, I think it can be all with a positive end result. And so that means just with the reevaluation of how we do things, it's forced on us, but it's an opportunity as well. And if I look at it that way, I think we can come out on top. It's proving to be an opportunity for us to say, how can we do things better? How can we make the show look better, sound better, come across as a more professional broadcast? And so I think what viewers are going to notice, Rocco, is that we're putting a real effort into more detailed hands-on tech. I've often done unboxings where we've then started assembling circuits or various, whether it be a single board computer that we're adding a thermal imaging sensor to and using it to see if our co-host's hands are hot or not, so we're going to do more of that kind of stuff, but with a more professional kind of polish to it. So I'm working with like a Meradroid, we all know and love, to be able to do more single board computer stuff. Yep. I already have great relationships with Pine 64, Odroid, various manufacturers of single board computers. I work a lot with Raspberry Pi, so I'm going to be doing a lot more of that kind of stuff. Very hands-on. So, and again, I just gotta get the construction crew in here to set things up. I can't have an overhead camera yet. So it's coming. Yeah. It's coming.
It'll all come along.
Yeah.
But, being involved with so many creations, so many podcast episodes for so many years, it has to have been very rewarding. But is there something maybe that sticks out in your mind as a special memory, a special episode, maybe something?
Wow. I think what I've found, what I've evolved into as a host, is that part of what I'm passionate about is finding the personal side of the tech, if that's a good explanation for it. I think it's really easy for me just to unbox a product and show you how it works and move on. I love finding that personal side. And instead, in interviews especially, and you're doing it right now. Gosh, you're doing it, Rocco. You're using me against me. And you do it very well. I think being able to look behind the people who create the technology and understand a little bit more about what makes them tick is really, really a cool, interesting way to conduct interviews. And I think it's a really, it's informative and educational, but it's also a little bit against the flow of the norm. And so I love that. I loved, if I can be honest, having Amy Double D come on the show and talk about how COVID-19 has impacted her and her family. Having the producers, the creators of the Orville, come on Category5 TV and talk about that, and even show us how they make the show behind the scenes, and take the lid off of a $400,000 model of the Orville ship and show us what it looks like up close. And then realize from the YouTube comments that, wow, the edges are really a little bit rough, aren't they? So I think just getting beyond the surface level of the tech and getting behind this, I'll use the term behind the scenes, but it's not necessarily behind the scenes. It's just, who are the people? Because we're all people. And I think celebrityism makes it so that sometimes interviews can come across as inapproachable.
Yep.
And I think that is something that I really want to do more of, and something that I'm proud of. And that's how I've kind of been evolving as an interviewer. That's
where it's all about, dude. It's,
I think so.
The people behind all of the things that you see.
Yeah, when we realize that everybody's just another person, we're like, and I think maybe what we're all going through right now together is, it has the power to bring that out in us, where we realize that, wow, everybody's going through this. Nobody's different than anyone else. It's how we react to it. But that aside, it's really just a realization that even the most famous guest that we could have on our show is still just a person. And if I can find that and have that discussion, it's a really, that, like you asked for one moment, there's not one moment. But that evolution of the interview process for me has been a really, really special thing. And I think just being able to call these people friends now and be able to say that, well, I'm really proud of this and that and that and that discussion, and that to me is really, there's too many points, Rocco. It's more of a mindset or a way, a methodology.
Well, talking about Linux Spotlight, I have interviewed people that are quote unquote popular and people that are not popular, or maybe only popular with a certain part of the community. And I think in every interview, what I've tried to do is show them that person, regardless if you like them or not, if they're a person and they have reasons for doing what they do. And I think when there were times where people saw an episode of one of the Linux Spotlight episodes and said, wow, I never really thought about that from his aspect, after they explained what they thought and how they did what they did. And I think it's so easy for us, even just down to like using Linux and using distributions, to forget that there is so many awesome people behind what we're using. It's easy to get mad at an operating system or a distro that doesn't work the way we want it to work. And yet there are so many people that have put hundreds of hours, thousands of hours into doing it for free. I think that we need to see the personal side of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed.
All right, dude. Have you been to any of the great Linux conferences out there?
No, I regret that I haven't. And that's really just where I'm at in life, as a father of 3 young kids, and with the work schedule that I do keep, it's really hard to get away. And I say really hard, it's impossible, really. The time will come. I am I'm the developer of NEMS Linux. So we're an official derivative of Debian. And so being part of that, the invitation, I think, is always there to fly out and promote NEMS Linux. So at the Deb conferences and everything else. So I think that would be fun. I think that would be a lot of fun, but I got to be at that place in my personal life to be able to do that.
Well, tell us about NEMS Linux.
So I'm a big fan of single board computers, and Category5 needed a way to monitor our servers and everything when I'm not here. So I used a Raspberry Pi to set up a Nagios server, and I did some really cool things with it to make it a little more user-friendly and intuitive. And so then I showed it on my show, and I called it NEMS, Nagios Enterprise Monitoring Server. And because I showed it on the show, of course, everybody wanted it. So I had to register nemslinux.com and make it a distributable distro. And then Debian contacted me because they wanted it on their derivative census. And it's grown and grown and grown. So it's been pretty cool. But it's really it's Nagios for the masses for single board computers, virtual appliances. And it's just a drop-in appliance to monitor all your assets. So it's an IT tool.
Right. Well, you've mentioned the Pis and single board computers a ton. So it's obviously something that you're into. So what is like a favorite project you worked on with the Pi?
It's NEMS.
Single board.
Okay. NEMS, definitely. Yeah. It's an ongoing fun project. So, and it's built up a huge community. So, so definitely NEMS is where it's at from that perspective. But I love just tinkering and just playing around. But it all comes back to those early days of computing when you could take things apart and understand how they worked. Well, same thing goes for a single board computer, and it's you're really interacting with the hardware, which is something that I really love. There's just too many projects that I think a lot of it, Rocco, too, is that I play with it a lot. Like I play with single board computers a lot in the little bit of free time that I can. So I dabble, but that leads to a lot of unfinished projects. So
a lot of rabbit holes.
Yeah, but it's fun along the way. So I don't have a problem with that. Like I don't feel like dissatisfied that, hey, I started creating this really cool circuit for the GPIO and you know I've made some really cool stuff. At least I think it is in my basic engineering capabilities. But whether I finish them or not, it's just the fun of doing the project and learning and always evolving that knowledge. And NEMS is really where it falls, is that it's a completed project. It's an ongoing project, but it's completed in that it's distributable and replicatable and can be used by anyone. So it's kind of my pride and joy when it comes to single board computers, because it's done so well.
What is one of them cool projects you made with a single board computer?
Well, it started from we needed an on-the-air light, so I created a system that checked if our Nimble Streamer broadcast was online, and then would light up an LED based on the GPIO pins and a relay, a little 12-volt relay, and 5 volts off the GPIO, 12-volt power to the LED. So it started with that. But what I did is I set static IP addresses on my co-hosts' phones on our DHCP server. So when they would enter the proximity of our Wi-Fi, my DHCP server would assign the same IP address to that phone every time. So our old studio, Studio D, had a lobby, which I would lock at the after hours. So as they're arriving after hours, I needed a way to know if they were there. So I got each of them an LED light, and as soon as they pull up to the building, their phone automatically connects to our Wi-Fi, obviously. And Raspberry Pi A Plus is pinging their IP address at an interval and will light up the light as soon as they arrive. So it says, Jeff has arrived, and I know to go open the door. So just like silly little projects like that. It's so simple.
That is awesome, though.
But I found a Pi hat that had 6 relays on it. So you just plug it into the GPIO, and it's just a hat that goes on there with 6 relays. So I can trigger up to 6 lights off of a single A+. So, and then I just made the program to do it, which is just fun. It's just fun.
Yep. That is awesome, dude. I love it. Well, we kind of like angered the open source enthusiasts with Davinci Resolve already.
Sorry. Remember how Rocco said, whether you like them or hate them, we get to know them.
There you go.
So you would know my perspective, at least.
Well, I usually ask
sorry.
the guests, I'll ask everybody, where do you stand on open source software? Are you that person that only uses open source software? Or are you that person that will use whatever tool's the best tool for the job? Obviously, you are on that pragmatic side, but how has that been received from, have you seen any backlash or community uproar because you're not all open source?
You tend to, but I think being on air for as long as I have been, you kind of move on from those comments a lot. You choose what to absorb. Now, I say that, but I take criticism very constructively. And if there's ever any way that I can get better at what I do, so I do listen to those bits of feedback. I do listen to my community and watch for ways. With video editing, it's a whole different thing because everybody will say, "Oh, try this one, try this." I did. Yeah, I spent 2 weeks installing every open source video editor that I could try, and none of them came close. So that's just where that was at. But so where do I fall? I will. Can I use an analogy? Let's use margarine as the analogy. I think that works. How many of us will spend $8 on a thing of margarine because it's the brand that we like and it's the brand name, right? So I'm kind of the guy that will, okay, well, here's one that's less money, that's no name. I'll try it and I'll see if it's any good first. And if it's good, then I'll use it. And I'm going to save money, it's going to be great. If it's not good, then I'll decide to go with the more expensive one that I know is good. So the analogy is that I will try every open source thing that there is to meet my need. And if it works and it does a great job and it does what I need and it's good, or at least that I can work around the quirks if there are some, then that's what I will choose to do. I love it. I feel like I don't care that I'm saving money. I care that this is open source. The freedom of that is fantastic. And I'm supporting a community and maybe the developers are being supported by my usage of that application or even encouraged. But if there is no tool that's available, if there's no, if the no-name margarine is disgusting, then I'm going to go with the commercial product or the closed source product or whatever it is that I know is going to meet the need and suit the purpose. So for years, for me, that was Adobe Photoshop. For years. I used it in Wine, so I was at least on Linux. But then when CS2 broke Linux compatibility, I had to install a virtual appliance, so I used VirtualBox to install Windows with Adobe Photoshop in it. So I had to do all my visual editing in Photoshop if there was scaling involved. But everything else I would do in GIMP. So it just was like back and forth between a virtual appliance and a virtual machine and GIMP natively on Linux for years. And then finally, when they fixed that scaling issue, I was able to switch because I don't do CMYK. But somebody who does graphic design in CMYK instead of RGB, you would have to use Photoshop.
Yep.
Plain and simple. So we just got to be realistic, I think. That's my conviction. That for me now, I can use GIMP 2.10 or whatever plus, and it's perfect for me. I work in RGB. The person who's a graphic designer who's working for print in CMYK can't say the same thing. So it's not a universal answer. GIMP is not universally okay. For me, it is. It's perfect. So that's all I use now.
Well, I love the margarine analogy, but $8 for margarine, dude?
I don't know. It's like lactantia or something. It's vegan.
Well, you mentioned the YouTube comments and how you take them. But I think that we can, every time I get a comment, regardless if it's good or bad, I will read it and try to learn from that comment. There are some comments that are just terrible sometimes, but I try to figure out what that person is trying to say behind it.
Sure.
And learn from it and not absorb it. You know what I'm saying? Like absorb the constructive criticism, but
don't
not
take
absorb
it personally, Rocco.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah. There are in any community, and so not our community, so not your community or my community, but in the YouTube community, there are trolls. And so there are some that you just have to ignore. And there are some, like, I'll be honest with you, I have female co-hosts and I'm constantly deleting crude, vulgar stuff. Like that, I don't need to take that constructively. Thank you.
Right.
Goodbye. But if somebody says your mic or, something, okay. I'm immediately thinking, okay, well, what about my mic? I need to see what it is that I need to do differently. So yeah, take the good stuff constructively. Don't take it personally, and sometimes just delete it.
Yep. Well, I started using Linux years ago because I could customize it. I was on Windows and I was trying to customize Windows, and that's worthless. So
I changed the wallpaper today.
Well, I hear about Linux and I try it and I love it. And that's what started the whole thing. That's what brought me here. And over the years, the community that has grown in Linux and specifically in BDLL has been absolutely awesome. And that is the reason that I stay with Linux, is because of the community. What drives your passion for Linux?
Well, very much the same kind of stuff. The customizability is very important to me. But wow, that's surprisingly a thick question, because Linux is at the heart of everything I do on my computer. So the choice between Windows and Linux, it's not even an anti-Microsoft thing. It's nothing like that. It's just the freedom of, there's that stupid term. So now I have to define, which kind of freedom are you talking about? Free as in beer? We have so many silly terms in the community, don't we? I think, as somebody who, I think you've probably gleaned from our discussion here, that I love being hands-on with my devices. I love understanding how they tick. I love being able to work under the hood, and Linux gives me that. You talk about customizing the kind of the DE in Linux terms, the user interface, or however you want to term it. So that's a similar kind of thing. Like, it's the customization, the being able to, hey, I really want it to do this or act like this or be like this, and you can do that. You just find the way to do it, or the package. Somebody's probably already done it, and you just install it. For the graphic end of things, I'm like, that's what brings me every time back to Compiz. I just love, like, I know wobbly windows are just fun, but it still makes people go, oh, that's so cool. But for productivity, using the ability to change workspaces, whether I have Compiz running or not, workspaces are a big reason to use Linux. I know Windows 10 has gone a long way to bring that to the Windows environment, but I have a virtual machine on one side of a cube. I've got my graphic editing on another side of a cube, and I just flip them around and jump from one thing to the next. So, and it's just great. Like, everything is just so rock solid these days.
Well, I think after so many years of using Linux, it sort of becomes a part of you. So I can't imagine myself using Windows as a choice right now. Not that there's anything wrong with using Windows, but me personally,
comes back to the margarine, Rocco.
Right? I can't personally imagine myself using Windows on a daily basis. It's like Linux is already a part of you as a person. So, All right. So there's a lot of people, dude, that are in the community. They don't, they're not maybe very vocal. They maybe feel they can't contribute. You are an example of somebody who contributes to Linux by all of the years you have created content, things like NEMS. What would you say to those people who feel they can't contribute in a meaningful way?
Can't contribute. I'd be, what are you talking about? What are you saying? We use the term community, and I think even just being a part of a community. So if I had no computer skills, if that was me, just being a part of that community of users, that you probably have done something that someone else is going to try to do. So being there as a listening ear and somebody who can say, oh, well, I went through that same thing. Here's how I solved it. It's that's a great way to help with the community, because people are always learning. And what's coming to mind here, so you might think I look distracted. No, I'm thinking about how we can so easily fall into the opposite of that, which is to think, oh, well, I've already figured it out, so you should figure it out. There's that side of the Linux community that is really regrettable, because we're not going to, if our goal is, let's just pretend our goal was to win over people from Windows, it's not the conversation that you should be having. I think we just need to remember, and it comes back to me raising the kids with my wife. It's like, I have to remember that I had to learn, and you have to remember that you had to learn. And where you're at right now, you can guide other people to be able to learn those same things. But we just got to remember that they haven't learned it yet. So don't be like, read the manual. Like, here's how I would solve that, and guide people, because that's part of what community, that's what's so cool about community. So I don't think, Rocco, that anyone is incapable of being a part of the furtherance of Linux, because if you want to call it a mindset, it's not. It's just humanity is a mind. Like, is it a mindset? Like, just figure out what you enjoy about Linux and share that with other people. And I think that goes a long way too.
Yep, I agree. All you have to do is just be there. That's the first step.
And don't be a jerk.
Don't be. That's
seriously.
A good step.
You can be there and be a jerk.
But yes, just be there, and you'll find yourself being a part of it regardless. So, all right, dude. You've heard it 1,000 times probably. The year of the Linux desktop. So is it a meme at this point, or are we bad at marketing Linux or promoting it, or how do you feel about that term?
It's a silly term, isn't it? I mentioned Lindows. Lindows was available on Walmart PCs. So was that the year of the Linux desktop? They thought it was. So when is this year of the Linux desktop? I mean, we have a 1.3% market share. Yes, must be now. No, whatever. It's just one of those silly terms, right? I think as people realize how powerful Linux is, and how it's not just for geeks, because there are great distros out there that are user-friendly, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I say user-friendly, non-tech geek user-friendly. Those are the ones we want to show people. Don't show them Gentoo today.
Right.
Like, that's not the one to get your mom and dad started on. So
Linux on a whole has come such a long way, where we have distros that you don't ever have to crack open a terminal.
Oh yeah.
It's so
we do that
user-friendly,
for fun.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, we are in a really good time for Linux, and I think that I tell people about, we don't need to go out there and force it on people. We don't need to go out there and jam it down their throats. You show them by example of what you use, and if they're interested in it, they'll ask.
It's all about the next generation. My kids have never seen anything but Linux.
Uh-oh.
No, they love it, but there's even limitations there. I mean, they can't play Roblox on Linux. So,
yep.
Yeah. So it's same kind of thing.
All right, man. Let me ask you, if you could change one thing, and only one thing, in Linux, any area of Linux, what would it be?
Wow. Let's
You have a
one thing in
magic
Linux.
wand, and you can just go boom, change something about Linux. What would it be?
So we're talking about the operating system, not the community, not the
Anything
so
to do
kernel.
with Linux.
Are we talking about the kernel?
The kernel, the community, the operating system, whatever it may be.
Oh, okay, so we can talk about the community. Wow, that's really a big question, Rocco. I really don't know. What would I change? I think Linux just continues to evolve. So the operating system is doing great. The kernel is doing great. We really don't need a floppy driver, guys. If you think we need a floppy driver, I mean, there's the obvious stuff. Like, I'd really love to see better video editing, or at least like ready to go professional video editing. As you say, though, Davinci Resolve is filling that gap, although closed source. But so that's just kind of the obvious.
Hey, I think it's awesome that we can sit here and have a conversation and struggle to think of something that we would change.
Yeah. I think really, yeah, maybe that's it. If I could change one thing, I would limit the number of those advocates who give it a bad name, because like any community, it can be very off-putting. And it's unfortunate if, like you asked, one of your first questions was about, how do I approach Linux around the dinner table with my extended family? And I don't, because I just don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be pushy, and maybe that's not what you mean, but there are two sides to the community, and one of them is that kind nurturing side that wants to see others experience the freedom that Linux has to offer. And then there's those who are very much like, don't be stupid. Why are you using Windows? Like that, somebody that's
I know
like that.
exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. So, but if we have a more down to earth, realistic attitude about Linux, then maybe that would bring about the year of the Linux desktop, perhaps. Yep. Because if it's so greatly about, it's a great operating system. The distros are fantastic, but it's hugely about the community. What is going to draw people? Why would someone want to switch from Windows if it works for them? Oh, well, this one's free. Well, my computer came with Windows. So what is in it for me? Well, if the community is in it for them, well, that's a whole different thing. It's a whole, and it's amazing. So,
well, I can tell you that the community has been really, really awesome. There are certain segments of it that kind of, you want to hang your head and say, no, don't say that, but overall, I think that those voices are getting smaller and smaller. And the idea is to lift up people like yourself who offer that friendly feel to Linux, that welcoming feel to say, hey, if you want to try this, I'll help you. I think that's the best thing. All right, man. Is there anything else you want to share with people?
Well, I think you're doing a great job, Rocco. Enjoying the show. And I talked about how I really want to be that kind of interviewer that is bringing about the personal touch of the tech. And I think that's a space that you're really you're really finding a niche in. So keep up the great work. As far as things to share, I mean, everyone who's watching this already knows what I just said. So I just had to vocalize it. But yeah, I mean, check out my show, buy a mug.
There you go.
Yeah, we have a lot of fun, and it's a free show. We do have a Patreon page, and everything else to support it, but it's freely available. We have BitTorrent downloads and everything else. You can stream on demand.
Nice. How's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I think Discord, probably. Our Discord channel server is quite active. So, and I'm quite often there. So that's probably the best way. I'm just Robbie F on our Discord server. So if you go to our website, click on Interact, and that's where you'll find it. There's all kinds of ways that you can get in touch, though. That's the best way.
Well, Robbie, thank you so much for sitting down with me. It was a great conversation, man.
Thanks, Rocco. Yeah, pleasure, man.
And I do want to thank you before we go about all of the years of content that you've created. It is a wonderful contribution to Linux.
Cheers.
All right, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us this week as we spotlight the best thing about Linux, our community. Until next time, long live Linux.